This is the story of a duck who discovered the island of dreams. Once upon a time, there was a mallard living in a pond in the middle of a big city. This wasn't just any mallard, though. No, this was Ferdinand Mallard the First, a true leader of ducks. His feathers were always neatly preened. His quack was the loudest in the pond, and he had the best, biggest nest for his 12 ducklings. Now, Ferdinand was a curious duck. Every morning, before paddling around the pond, he would stare at the fluffy white clouds and imagine what it would be like to live among them. He'd flap his wings and jump into the air, pretending to fly higher and higher until he could touch the clouds. The other ducks thought he was silly, but Ferdinand didn't mind. He knew one day he would find a way to live among the clouds. One day, as Ferdinand was staring dreamily at the clouds, a small plane flew overhead. It was only the second plane he'd seen in his life. The first had flown over when he was a little duckling, and seeing it had filled him with so much joy that he ran around the pond in circles, quacking with excitement. But this time, something strange happened. As the plane flew overhead, Ferdinand felt an urge, a strong desire to follow it. He looked at his ducklings, all paddling happily in a line behind him. Then he looked back at the plane, which had already turned and was heading toward the mountains in the distance. Ferdinand hesitated for a moment, then suddenly turned and followed it. His ducklings quacked in surprise, but they quickly fell into line behind their father. After all, they knew better than to disobey him. After a while, Ferdinand noticed that the other ducks in the pond were staring at him, trying to figure out where he was going. He turned around and gave them his best Ferdinand stare, the one that told them to mind their own business. Then he turned back around and continued following the plane. As they flew over the mountains, Ferdinand felt a thrill unlike anything he'd ever experienced before. The wind ruffled his feathers. The sun warmed his belly. And below him, the world looked like a patchwork quilt, all stitched together with winding rivers and roads. He'd never realized how beautiful the world was until he'd seen it from above. Finally, the plane disappeared over the horizon. But Ferdinand didn't care. He kept on going. After all, he thought, the pilot must have gone somewhere. If he kept on going in that direction, he'd find wherever it was. That's exactly what had happened. The pilot had flown to an island no one had ever seen before, not even on the most detailed maps. It was an island made of clouds, and it floated in the sky like a giant marshmallow. When Ferdinand and his ducklings arrived, they were greeted by a warm breeze and the sound of tinkling bells. They paddled around the island, marveling at its beauty. Lush green trees grew out of floating rocks. Sparkling waterfalls tumbled over rainbows, and friendly animals greeted them from inside cozy caves. There were horses who lived in houses made of spun sugar. There were rabbits with wings who hopped around on marshmallow clouds. And there were squirrels who gathered acorns that fell from the sky. And all around them were the most beautiful flowers Ferdinand had ever seen, flowers that smelled like cinnamon and nutmeg and tasted like sweet dreams. Ferdinand and his ducklings spent a whole week exploring the island, and every day was filled with magic and wonder. Finally, it was time to go home. Ferdinand felt sad to leave, but he knew his ducklings missed their pond. Plus, he thought, there's no place like home. When they returned to the pond, everything seemed a bit dull. The water was murky. The cattails drooped, and the dragonflies had all flown away. Ferdinand sighed. He tried to explain to the other ducks about the island of dreams, but they just stared at him blankly and went back to paddling around the pond. Ferdinand was sad, but he knew he couldn't stay in the pond. Not now that he'd seen what life was like outside. So he and his ducklings built the biggest, fluffiest nest they could find. And every night they snuggled up together and dreamed of cinnamon flowers, winged rabbits, and a horse made of spun sugar. And that's the story of the duck who discovered the island of dreams. A story about following your dreams, no matter how impossible they may seem, because, who knows, you might just find an island made of clouds waiting for you at the end of your journey.